Donald Duck is one of those characters where if you mention their name, just about anyone would know who you're talking about, unless for some reason they start thinking of Daffy Duck. And sure, we might only be able to understand him half of the time, but that white duck in a sailor outfit is still ingrained in our mind, and for good reason too. He's a part of the illustrious Disney trio, Mickey, Goofy, and Donald, and part of the other great trio, Goofy, Donald, and Sora. A big part of his shtick, in my opinion, was how he was quick to anger, which put him in hilarious situations. Plus, that anger is a nice change of pace from the comparatively more mellow natures of Goofy and Mickey, unless you look way back, which we're not because I kinda don't want to watch a bunch of propaganda shorts. But if that's your type of thing for whatever reason, more power to ya. And while he doesn't have the best movie out of the trio, Goofy movie, he makes up for it by the sheer number of things he's been in. I'm still trying to figure it out, but apparently he's appeared in more movies than any other Disney character, clocking in at around 200 movies. And to add on to that, he's also been in the most published comic books outside of the superhero genre. And putting back into superheroes makes him the 5th most published comic book character of all time. But more importantly, that perfectly ties into the topic of today's video. You see, Donald Duck actually had a crack at being a superhero, sort of. The idea of this superhero Donald Duck was birthed in Italy, but the executive director Topolino, an Italian Disney comic, originally wanted a Superman version of Mickey Mouse. And while that sounds cool and all, they decided to pivot and give that superhero title to Donald Duck. Thus the world was given Paperinik, or PK. Though in America he was known as the Duck Avenger. Got a cool ring to it, right? Now, back to what I was talking about earlier, his origin story is that Donald was gifted a villa, which turned out was actually meant for his cousin Gladstone. In the villa, he finds a costume that belonged to a gentleman burglar from the 19th century, which makes sense because the only people calling anyone gentlemen burglars are probably found on some unsavory websites. Old Don decides to don the mantle, not to use it for good or anything, but to get back at any grievances he feels he may have suffered. Literally, the first thing he does is steal a $1 million mattress from his Uncle McScrooge and blame it on his previously mentioned cousin. He then just gloats about it and says that his new career has just begun. And I don't know about you, but that's some heinous stuff right there. I'm pretty sure the writers also knew this, which is why they started to have PK shift from a vindicator to an actual hero. Though he kinda still did things illegally. And as things started to get stale, writers sought to reinvigorate the character in different ways, such as making it more action-oriented or by ramping up the level of threat PK faced. And then of course, there was the game. Yes, the game known as PK Out of the Shadows, which I'm pretty sure was only bought because it had Donald Duck on the cover. This was kind of a lateral move from the PK New Avengers comics as it shared a common villain and focused a lot more on the action, but I'm getting ahead of myself because you might want to know what the actual story is. Well, it starts with Donald Duck in his illustrious security guard job where, feeling emasculated, he wishes he could be a superhero. Luckily for him, a creepy stalker AI hears his pleas and turns him into that superhero. He gets some new duds, some new gadgets, and he even gets a new voice somehow. And I'm like 99% sure that's the voice of Donatello from one of the TMNT series. Anyway, the main reason this green AI grants Donald his nighttime wish is because a group of aliens named Avronians threaten to invade Earth and a superhero is needed to stop it. You fight through a lot of enemies until you get to head to the mothership and take the aliens out at their core by beating their general. And we get a wonderful-ish ending that is basically a sequel hook. Too bad for them though, because this game was pretty poorly received, which is probably why any plans of a sequel were dashed. But as for the story, that's about it. I think there were only like a total of 6 cutscenes, but the game is real short, so I guess it's fine? Actually is not fine. I don't know what kind of world it was back then, but how is it okay for a AAA company to put out a full-price game that only takes a couple hours to beat? Enough of that. It's time to get into the jam-packed action. So have you played any third-person platformers on the PS2? I'm talking your Jak and Daxters, your Ratchet and Clanks, your Sly Coopers. Well, this plays like those games, but without the charm, the great level design, and the overall fun factor. Actually, the most interesting thing this game does is that the only way you can use the checkpoints is by having enough collectible items, but they're in such obvious places that you're not going to be missing any checkpoints unless you're actively avoiding them. You get upgrades, but they don't really change anything because you'll just be strafing and shooting half the time. The game is really easy, and there are only 2 bosses in the entire thing, both revolving around strafing and shooting. The only reason the final boss was annoying is because I didn't know it was possible to fall into the level. Meanwhile, the minions aren't even worth talking about, honestly, except for this one. I hate them to my core. And don't even get me started on that level design. Every level in this game looks almost identical because it's basically a bunch of hallways in a laboratory or something. Even the unique levels feel pretty samey. I will say that I do like the stylistic choices though. The graphics emulate the feel of being in a comic without actually being cel shaded, which I appreciate. But then there's the occasional wonkiness with the camera where it wanted to view the room in one way as if it was a fixed camera, which really disoriented me a couple of times and got me killed the other times. I will say that I really enjoy the final segment of the game after you get your last power up, because it's the section where you get really powerful and it's really cathartic to destroy these enemies that took so many hits earlier, especially when they throw a bunch of them at you. But that's about it. What you should gain from all of this is that you should probably play some of the other better games that I mentioned a little bit back. This is a game that you should play only if you're a big Donald Duck fan, because I don't see any other reason to play it. And even at that point, you'll be better off going ahead and reading the comics, especially the earlier run since it's way better. Shoot, the debut issue of PK is considered an Italian classic, I'm pretty sure. Or instead of that, you can just watch one of the many plethora of shows Donald Duck is in, like that new DuckTales show. Or if you wanted to play a game, you could play the one where he has to save his girlfriend, because although it's been a while since I played it, it's probably better than this game. But past that, what else is there to say other than make sure to like and subscribe, but before you go quackers, have a good day.